Hello, welcome to another video from the conscientious biologist, Ben Gallagher. This is a reasonably quick one, and we look at the human eye, but I've split all the information on the human eye into two videos. This one just looks at the structure, the different layers and the different parts of the human eye. The next one is going to look at the various mechanisms that are at work within the eye that control vision. Now, the reason why I've made this one quite brief and short is that there's a lot of information in here, and I'd like you to watch it, then spend some time really trying to memorize all the different bits of the eye and what they do. That information doesn't take me long to explain, but it will take you a while to make sure you learn it all. That's why this one's quite brief. It's from the GCSE specification, and as always, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you. So let's start off just by looking at eyes and what amazing evolutionary adaptations eyes are. Now, being able to see is a massive evolutionary advantage. You think in the wild, any animal you can think of would have eyes and would have vision. The only exceptions to that are those for whom eyes would be entirely pointless because they live their entire life in the dark. So think about like a mole that burrows underground, it lives its whole life underground, it lives in the pitch dark. Having eyes to see light when you don't live somewhere where there's any light to see would be pointless. Other examples might be creatures that say live in the very, very deep sea or deep in caves where no light ever penetrates. But for everything else, the ability to see and perceive light is such a huge evolutionary advantage that it's evolved everywhere, all over the planet. Okay, for wild animals that don't have vision, that go blind, their survival chances are very, very slim. So important is vision to wild animals. Now, really importantly, vision has evolved many times. It didn't just evolve once and then spread out and everything had eyes. Many times, totally independently, totally separately through the evolutionary history of our planet. That's because no matter where organisms found themselves, the ability to see was important, so it evolved. But that means you've evolved loads and loads of different types of eye. Now, this is a list of just all the different eye types that you've got. You've got pit eyes, spherical lens eyes, multiple lenses, refractive corneas, and on and on. You don't need to know any of these. I'm just putting them there because I don't want you to think, when you think eyes, you just think about human eyes. There's loads and loads of different types. I'm going to get rid of this list though, because you don't need to memorize it. I just wanted you to know there were so many types. There's 10 actually, 10 different identified eye types that evolved separately on the planet. Now, we're used to seeing human eyes, so we know about human eyes, but that's what we're going to look into more detail in a minute. But let's look at a few different types. Spiders' eyes, for a start, they've got lots of eyes, but how their eyes work is slightly different. Reptile eyes, this is a snake eye. Look at the pupil for a start, it's a different shape. They function in a slightly different way. Squid eyes, squids live in the deep sea, so they need massive eyes to make use of the light. A colossal squid, which is the largest type of squid, larger than a giant squid, a colossal squid's eyeball is about the size of a basketball. It's enormous. That's because they need to make use of all the light, or any light that does come down to the great depths at which they live. Look at this one though as a totally different example. A fly. Lots of insects have these really weird types of eye called a compound eye. Now, at this point, I want you to stop and just think what an eye is for. All it needs to do is receive information about light. So it takes in light waves, converts them into electrical impulses to go and tell the brain. There's millions of ways in which you can do that, which is why there's so many different types of eye, but they all sort of function in the same sort of way, that they receive light impulses. But how they receive it and how they process it can differ. Let's look at another really weird evolutionary example now. I love this creature. This is a glasshead fish, only lives in the very deep sea. Now, if you look at the front, the very front of this fish, you'll see where the eyes were, just above its mouth, but they've kind of de-evolved and closed over. Because it lives in such great depths where there is so little light, it's evolved that the total top of its head has gone totally transparent like glass, and those green ball-like objects you can see inside, those are its eyes pointed upwards to try and make use of any dim light that might be coming down to the great depths. Now, that's a really complex, massive evolution that this creature's done just to make use and try and exploit any light that can come to it. So that's an amazing thing. The last one, and this is a bit of a weird one because not technically an eye, but I'm illustrating how important vision can be. This is a paramecium. Now, this is a single-celled protoctist organism. Now, because it's single-celled, it clearly can't have an eyeball because eyeballs are made of millions of cells. But what paramecium have is an area where there's a high concentration of light-receptive chemicals that can detect whether there is or isn't light. That little region is called the eye spot of the paramecium, and it does kind of function as an eye. It can't have complex detailed vision like we do, but it just says whether it's light and dark. Now that's really important for a paramecium because look at it. It's got lots of little green blobs in. That's chlorophyll. Paramecium have got a photosynthetic ability, and for photosynthesis you need light. So the ability to tell when it's light and dark is really useful, because if the paramecium finds itself in a bit of shade, it can detect that and it can move itself to where there's more sunlight to increase its rate of photosynthesis. It can literally move to more favourable areas because it can detect what is and isn't favourable. That's just illustrating how important vision is. So being able to receive and then process information from light helps us find food, find mates, find shelter, avoid predators because you can see them coming. But really importantly, it allows us to communicate. So much of our communication is visual. As with all animals, you look at things, look at what the other creatures are doing, make gestures to each other. It's a really, really useful thing. So eyes are an amazing evolutionary achievement. Let's now look at the details of the human eye to see how the human eye works. So the human eye is the receptor organ for light. We need to look at all the layers and structures within it that allow it to see the light. In the next video, we'll look at how it controls, how it maximizes use of. Speaking, the eye is spherical. It's like a ball. So you've got this tough layer on the outside. That's called the sclera. It's white in color. It's the bit when you look at your eye. If you look at mine, that white bit is the sclera. It's the bit that kind of makes it like the outside of a tennis ball, the hard covering that's there. Okay. Now inside the sclera, you have a liquid called the vitreous humor. So really, like a cell, you've got a skin and you've got a liquid inside it. But this is much bigger, it's much tougher on the outside. That's the sclera, full of vitreous humor. Now at the front of the eyeball, so if you're looking at that eye there as if it's like that, as if you're looking like a cross section through, so you can see that the light would be coming in from that direction. At the front, you've got the cornea. This is a slight bulging bit at the front, but the cornea is transparent. This is what's going to allow light into the eye. Next, you've got a layer that lines the inside of the eyeball. So inside your eyeball, you've got this black lining. Now, the reason for that is that black doesn't reflect. So you're preventing internal reflection into the eye. So when light goes into the eyeball, it shouldn't bounce around off the white sclera because you've just got black that's preventing that internal reflection. So that choroid layer is really important. Now at the front of the choroid, if you actually look at where I've drawn it, the choroid that's black becomes coloured as it comes in line with the cornea. That coloured part of your eye is the iris, and the hole that's left in between where light can go through, that's the pupil. Okay. Now remember, this is only a cross-section picture, so it's not like you've got two bits that dangle down or push upwards. Remember, this is three-dimensional, your eyeball. So your iris is that coloured bit that goes all the way around. So to help you visualise that, I'm going to pull up a picture that I've drawn of the front view of the eyeball, because that's obviously what you're more familiar with. And I'm going to put dotted lines across from mine so you can see exactly how the side view matches up with the front view. Because I don't want you getting confused with just this cross section. I want you to be able to link it to the front view. So if you look, the hole that I've left for the pupil on mine, over there, you can see where it links to the black hole. The iris that's visible through the transparent cornea, you can see forms that circle. If this was someone with blue eyes, it would look like that. The white sclera that's visible between the top of the eyeball and where the cornea stops, you can see is the white bit. So hopefully this diagram helps you understand how the cross section matches up with what you actually see. I'm going to get rid of that front view, so if you want to take a quick screenshot of this for reference, do so now. Okay, but I'm going to get rid of that front view so we can carry on labeling the rest. So the iris and the pupil is the hole that the light can go through. Next, you've got the really important layer. This layer at the back of the eyeball, but inside it lines, remember, three-dimensional picture, it lines the back of the eyeball. This is the retina. These are the cells that are sensitive to light. When light comes in, hits cells in the retina, they are what encode it into a nerve impulse. Think back to the nervous pathway videos we looked at. I did those little circles at the start of a sensory neuron. Those little circles would represent cells in the retina in this instance. Now the retina is then connected to your brain via the optic nerve. So the optic nerve would be packed with loads and loads and loads of sensory neurons, picking up information from the receptor cells in the retina and delivering them all to your brain. Okay. Next, inside the eyeball, in the vitreous humor, you've got the lens. We'll talk about the lens in the next video. The lens is what focuses the light onto the retina. Above and below, but remember this is all the way round inside your eyeball, you've got a ring of ciliary muscle. The ciliary muscle connects to suspensory ligaments that link to the lens. So again, remember, from the front, the lens would actually be circular and the suspensory ligaments are all the way around it, attaching it to the ring of ciliary muscles that are inside the round eyeball. Don't just focus on this flat two-dimensional cross-section. Try and think about how it all fits together, which is why it's really useful to do an eye dissection, because you can see all this in place. You can actually see the ring of ciliary muscle inside the eyeball if you dissect it. So you've got all these component parts in place in the eyeball. The ciliary muscle, suspensory ligaments and iris and lens we will talk about in the next video as to how they all work. But this gives you a complete structure now of all the different parts of the eye which you need to have memorized. The only thing I haven't mentioned is now at the front of the eye you've got a separate section of liquid, because the ciliary muscle, suspensory ligaments and lens kind of make a barrier. So in front of that you have a liquid called the aqueous humor. So it's the vitreous humor in the main bit of the eye, but because the suspensory ligaments and lens make a barrier, the liquid in the front is slightly separate and it's called the aqueous humor. But those are all the bits of the eye. I really need you to spend some time now trying to memorize all those bits. See if you can sketch the eye out. See if you can label all the different parts of it. Okay, try and do that, because in the exam you're likely to be asked to label the different parts of the eye and explain what they do. But we'll go into that in more detail in the next video. So head to that one now, which is Body Communication 5, Controlling Vision in the Human Eye. As always, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Like this video before you head off to the next one, and head to my Facebook page to have a look at some of the more supplementary science that I've put on there for you. Thank you.